Hello, my name is James Pywell and this is the 92 podcast. I'm on a quest to speak to one fan from each of the 92 football teams that make up the Premier League, the Championship, League One and League Two. Each episode I'll shine the spotlight on a different club, talking to their fans, play silly games and quizzes and learning what it's like to be a supporter of their team. In this episode we take a look at a team that were relegated from the Premier League last season. It's Watford.
We both just looked at each other and we just went, yeah! Jumped on each other. And I remember the customer was just looking, going, what the hell are you doing? You know, I think he gets the respect, I think, from the fans, but I think kind of it's probably when he retires and when he leaves the club, that's when we realise how special of a person and a player he was at the club. I always feel like I'm the northeast correspondent for Watford. When anytime Watford are in the news, I'll get a WhatsApp message from a friend saying, what's happening here? And I'm going, look, I don't know anything. I'm just following the news as you are.
Now, Watford are another one of those teams who I know of. I've seen some of their matches on the TV, but I don't really know too much about. Now, to help me add to that knowledge, I'm joined by Hornets fan Ivan. Hello, Ivan. Welcome to the 92 podcast.
Hi, James. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast.
So, how long have you been a fan of Watford?
Oh, wow. I'm going to be showing my age now, James. I suppose I was introduced to Watford probably about 25 years ago. As you might be able to tell by my accent, this obviously isn't an English accent. So I'm originally from Ireland, from Cork, and I suppose what I would say to that is there's not many Irish Watford fans, let alone Irish Watford fans living kind of in Northern England at the moment. But I was introduced to Watford by my aunt and my uncle-in-law, who actually live in Watford. So I remember years and years ago, when my uncle-in-law came over to Ireland just to visit us all. He was trying to get all his nieces and nephews in to become Watford fans. Now, I didn't know anything about the club, but the way he described them to me was they're just like Brazil, they wear yellow. Now, this was around France 98 when Ronaldo, the original Ronaldo, was unbelievable. They were exciting to watch. So I thought, I might as well give this a go. But I think when I went to my very, very first game, I think I soon realised that Watford were not Brazil. But the kind of the buzz of going to the game, the crowd, kind of the fans, just kind of got to me. And ever since then, I've been a lifelong Watford fan.
Is there ever been any times where you're thinking, why is it Watford that I support? Why is it not the likes of, Liverpool, Manchester United?
Well, I'll be honest with you. Growing up in Ireland, I probably spent half of my life telling people that I support Watford, not Waterford, which is very close to where I'm from, but also explaining who Watford were. Most of the times, most people when I was describing who I supported never kind of actually knew who Watford were. But then the minute I said, "Oh, Elton John used to own them," straight away they go, "Oh yeah, that's the team I remember." But yeah, growing up in school, it was quite actually difficult because you had all your traditional Manchester United because of Roy Keane being from kind of Cork in the same area, and loads of Manchester United, Liverpool, kind of Leeds, Celtic, and then you had kind of random Ivan supporting, at the time a championship club called Watford. So growing up, life would have been easier if I just decided to support one of the kind of the top six. But at the end of the day, I feel kind of my love for Watford is a lot more truer than maybe their love for kind of Manchester United or Liverpool or those big teams.
So you mentioned you're now living in the north of England. How does that fare? Obviously, you're living around teams like Sunderland and Newcastle, those kind of teams. What's the reception been like when you meet people and you're like, well, actually, I'm from Ireland and I support Watford?
It's quite funny because it's always the same face. It's always a confused face, as in, so you're a Watford fan from Ireland, but you're living in the northeast of England. And I'm like, yeah. And they just look at you a bit complexed, going, please explain. So the story of kind of Brazil and everything else, I've probably told the story probably about 100 times at least, just trying to explain to people. But at the same time, I think there's a level of respect I get from my friends and just random people supporting a kind of, a not top team as such, and kind of staying true to the colours of, Watford weren't always lucky to be in the Premier League for a couple of seasons. We didn't previously had owners. We had quite poor owners previously, and the club was financially in a in a bad position. So kind of I've been there through kind of what I would say kind of the thick and thin. So I find once I explain why I'm a Watford fan, I tend to get a kind of a level of respect, but also kind of, you're harmless. Watford, they're only a small club. They're fine. They're not, they don't annoy any other club. They don't tend to really have a massive rivalry or anything else. So it's kind of, oh, you're safe. We'll put you in the corner, Ivan.
So what is the atmosphere like at Watford Games at Vicarage Road?
To be honest, so even when I was in Ireland, I used to fly across probably 3-4 times a season to get to go to home games. So obviously living in the UK now, I'm able to get to the games a bit often. And one thing which I've brought kind of friends and family members to the games, and one thing they've always said about the club is that how welcoming it is. I suppose kind of looking back, Watford is traditionally kind of the first proper kind of family club, going back as far as kind of the Graham Taylor days and Elton John days. So Watford has always been kind of had that element of a kind of a family environment. I remember going to a game before, and I think maybe kind of an older gentleman maybe swore, and there's a big group around them, told them off for swearing because there was kids nearby. Where I've been to Manchester games, I've been to games in the North East, Sunderland, Newcastle. I've been to quite a lot of games in the UK. I've never seen that before. I've never seen kind of someone telling off someone else for swearing. So I suppose an element then of that is it's a safe environment for people to go to, because look, Watford, it's not renowned for its previous hooligan groups or anything like that. It's always been renowned for kind of a safe, kind of friendly-ish kind of club to go to. So it's really nice, and it's really kind of it's kind of assuring that when I go to the games, and regardless of who I bring or what age they are, they'll be going to a game where they feel safe, regardless of kind of their background or anything to that effect. So it's what I would say, it's a really nice environment to go to for any fan, regardless if you're a Watford fan or not.
So who is it that you go to Watford games with? Obviously you mentioned you've got family in Watford. Is it them that you go to the matches with, or do you tend to just go by yourself?
So my aunt and my uncle-in-law have been season ticket holders for, God, maybe 35, nearly 40 years. And they've always sat in the same seats as well, even though the seats, in my opinion, aren't the greatest. They always sat in the same seats, so they know everyone around them. And so I tend to always go to the games with them. At this kind of the same time, I've always been very, very lucky to be able to bring kind of friends and family to the particular home games. With the kind of away games, well, a nice little random one for you, James, is that I'm actually a member of the North East and Yorkshire Watford Supporters Club.
That exists?
Group that exists. There's not many of us, James. I'm not going to lie. There's not many of us. There was even less, I think, in the Irish one. I think there was only 3 turned up at the meeting for the Irish one years and years ago. So with the Watford, with the North East and Yorkshire supporters group, it's really, really good with that, because you get to kind of meet kind of obviously fans who've relocated and kind of find out their stories. But the benefits of that, and in particular with being in the North East, is obviously at one stage I was quite lucky enough to be able to get to a Sunderland and Newcastle game in the same season with Watford, and I brought some of my friends with me who are retrospective, other supporters for different clubs. But what they loved it, they absolutely enjoyed it, and kind of they have adopted Watford as their kind of their second team. So I always feel like I'm the Northeast correspondent for Watford. When anytime Watford are in the news, I'll get a WhatsApp message from a friend saying, "What's happening here?" And I'm going, "Look, I don't know anything. I'm just following the news as you are." But I tend to always get messages from them, which I think is quite funny.
So in terms of the games that you've seen, what is the best Watford game that you've been to?
That's a really good question. A really tough one as well to answer, because I've been to a few. Funnily enough, my aunt and my uncle were convinced that I was a curse, because any game previously I used to go to, genuinely for about 10 years, Watford would always lose. But luckily enough, I was able to go to the 2005 playoff final in Cardiff against Leeds. Now, on that particular weekend, Watford were complete underdogs. We were managed by Eddie Boothroyd. We got a team on a very, very low budget. Leeds were relegated, I think, the previous season or the season before that, so they were hot favourites to get promoted. Obviously, Leeds with kind of the vast amount of crowds and supporters they bring. But to be honest, James, we just completely outplayed them. I don't know if it was Leeds stage fright or we just were unbelievable that particular day, but we just completely outperformed them. We won 3-0 in the game, and I remember just the whole day was just an unbelievable experience to be able to go and to see your team kind of promoted to the Premier League, knowing that the likes of Manchester United, Liverpool, Chelsea are all going to be waiting for you next season. I remember a funny one though, because on that weekend, it was the same weekend of the Heineken Rugby final, European final. Now, my rugby team I support are Munster, and they were in that final as well. So we were just in a that was a Saturday, and the Watford game was a Sunday. So we went on the Sunday to the Cardiff for the game, and we're in the pub outside of the stadium. And I just heard quite a similar accent to mine. I was going, what's going on here? So I go over to him. I was like, all right, or how are you? He was like, I missed my ferry, so I thought I'd stay around for the football. And I was like, right, you're now a Watford fan. And I gave him a scarf, and I brought him over to my aunt and uncle, and he stayed with us for a couple of hours. And we ended up getting him a ticket for the game. It was nowhere near, I think, where us. And at the same time, I think that was probably a good thing. He wasn't sitting anywhere near us, because I think at that stage he was quite intoxicated, let's say. But just kind of that just even made the day itself. It kind of still to this day, I have memories, and I joke with the people I went just about kind of the whole day. I even remember kind of a nasty experience that we had on that day, but it was funny because we won 3-0. We're walking back to the train station. Obviously, we were delighted, but we were walking back, and I remember kind of a group of Leeds fans are outside of a bar, and they were kind of hurling loads of abuse and all this kind of, you're going to get down, get relegated, and all this. And I think my uncle's a very quiet man, but he just lost it. He started singing back to them, Southend on a Tuesday night, Southend on a Tuesday night. And I was going, Jesus, I didn't expect that from Dave, but well done, Dave. I'm really proud of you. So yeah, it was just overall as a day, it was just from a game I physically went to, it was just an unbelievable experience, an unbelievable kind of stories looking back.
Obviously, that's the highs of supporting Watford. What about the lows then? Is there any games that you would class as being the worst one you've ever seen?
See, that's quite tough, because I probably there's two that jump to mind. I suppose the very first one, I wouldn't say it was a low, because I suppose we were kind of expecting it as well. So it was the FA Cup final against Manchester City. Last FA Cup final that Watford were ever in was 1984, and I wasn't even born then. So when we got to the final, even though it was against Manchester City, I just thought, I have to go. This is potentially maybe once in a lifetime opportunity to get to an FA Cup final. And the weekend, I went with a friend of mine, a best friend of mine, and the weekend was amazing. We had a brilliant weekend down in London, had a laugh, everything else. It was the football that ruined the weekend. It was the football ruined the weekend. We lost 6-0. We had an opportunity at 0-0, Robert Pereira to score, and he fluffed his lines. And then Man City just kind of took charge and just took over, and we're Man City that we see today now. And obviously they beat us 6-0. So that was a bit of a kind of, if we lost maybe 2-3-0 and we were, fighting for it, fair enough, but Man City were just too good for us. I suppose the other game, and this was the second time I've been to Wembley, was when we lost the playoff final, the first playoff final to Crystal Palace, when we had that unbelievable comeback in the semi-final against Leicester, and we got to the final against Crystal Palace, and we lost after extra time, 1-0. Penalty from Kevin Phillips, who was obviously a legendary Sunderland player, but also was actually originally at Watford. So Watford originally, he was at Watford, and we sold him to Sunderland. So that was a great plan from us. But just looking back, because we had what was frustrating was we had our opportunities in that game to kind of take it to them. Still to this day, I can't stand Wilfried Zaha. There's something that I convinced still he dived. They got the penalty from that, and Kevin Phillips obviously finished it. So that was a bit of a tough one to take, because the season, I just think it felt right for us to go up, especially with the semi-final and just what happened in that. And then the final, I think it just would have been the perfect kind of crescendo to the season itself. But that's football, you know what I mean? You have the highs and you have the lows, and that's what I suppose makes it as exciting as a football fan, and in particular a Watford fan to kind of go to and to watch.
So you briefly mentioned there the chaos that was the last few minutes of the semi-final with, the Leicester penalty, Almunia saving it, and then Watford thundering up the pitch and Deeney getting that goal to fire you into the final. I know you've got a story about this. Where were you for that game?
Yeah, James. So it was a really strange one. So I was working at the time, and it was a Sunday, and I couldn't get the time off, so I had to work the day, and it was just me and my boss in this particular office, and he was also a football fan. So I was like, look, any chance I could listen to the game, because I couldn't watch it on my phone at the time. I know that sounds really old, but I couldn't. So I had to listen to it. So we were listening away, and there was customers coming into the office now and again, and all I heard was a penalty for Leicester, and I went typical. The one time I'm not watching it, the one time I'm not down to the game, blah blah blah, and I was kind of going, oh, I better listen to this, and obviously I heard about Almunia saving the penalty, and then I was like, oh, get in, and then all you can hear was the commentator on the radio just getting more and more and more excited, and then literally me and my boss shushed the customer. We said, do you mind just 2 seconds, sorry, and we turned it up on the radio to as loud as we possibly could. All I remember vividly hearing was Hog, and then Deeney. And then me and my manager, my manager's a Middlesbrough fan as well. We both just looked at each other and we just went, yeah! Jumped on each other. And I remember the customer was just looking, going, what the hell are you doing? Like, what is happening here? And I was like, yeah! Going absolute. I was in a full suit, like, trying to deal with this customer, but I was going absolute mental for a good 30 seconds. And eventually I was like, right, calm down. And I could just tell my face was just pure red from just kind of the pure adrenaline and excitement of what literally just happened. And the customer, anyway, we dealt with the customer, and the customer left. And and about a week later, a part of the job that I was doing, the customer would get a call about feedback and everything else. And the customer noticed, yeah, that the service was weird, but they were a bit strange in the office, so they asked, can you please explain what you mean by they were strange? And the customer noted on the feedback form that the two gentlemen behind the counter were so excited about something that they ended up hugging and just jumping up and down and crying. So obviously this got from central office back to my manager. So my manager had to explain what happened. So I think he just made up some sort of lie or something that he found out that I found out I was, my partner was pregnant or something, which was a complete lie. It was just very hard to him to explain that Almunia saved a penalty from Canacard, which wasn't a penalty, by the way. We went on the other end with Forestieri on the right-hand side. He crossed the ball into Jonathan Hogg and then played it off to Troy Deeney, who smashed it. And then all the fans jumped onto the pitch. And I remember Zola vividly slipping on the pitch because he was wearing suit shoes. He couldn't explain that, so I think Lizzie just says, "Oh, my Ivan found out that his partner's pregnant, so he was just incredibly happy, and we celebrated together." So yeah, so it was just I just remember as a Watford fan, I don't even think as a Watford fan you have to enjoy that what just happened in that clip. I think bar Leicester, I think everyone fell in love with that particular clip. And that is just pure joy and pure excitement and adrenaline of tragedy at one end, but then the excitement at the other. And like I was saying, it was just a really shame that we couldn't then kind of do that in the final. And I nearly kind of feel that was our final. That was our kind of our special moment to take away from it. I was just really gutted for Gianfranco Zola that we just couldn't kind of do it at the final step. But yeah. As a Watford fan, that kind of for me kind of stands out as probably one of my most favourite moments ever in football, but not physically being able to watch it ever. It was phenomenal.
So you said you've supported Watford for over 20 years. So you've obviously seen quite a lot of players play for the club. Who are some of your favourites?
It's funny enough because I suppose as a Watford fan, and the last kind of 20 plus years or so, you've had kind of two transition periods. So you've had the period before when we had no money, we had a really low budget, we would invest in non-league or kind of lower league players and then try to sell them on. And then we've had obviously the Pozzols come in, and we've had an influx of loan players from Udinese or Granada who've come into the club who I've never heard of, still to this day don't even know who they are. So I suppose in the earlier time growing up, when I was first kind of supporting, I had the likes of Heider Helgason, kind of Danny Webber, who I kind of idolised a bit. Heider Helgesen was probably a similar height to myself, about 5'10", 5'11", but that man could leap about 8 feet. Like, I swear, watching him, he had an unbelievable leap on him, and the amount of headers and stuff he scored for us was phenomenal. Kind of going on a little bit later on, the likes of kind of Jay Demerit, whose story is unbelievable. You know, from America, came to Europe to try in a football club, found a non-league club. They played Watford in a pre-season friendly. He signed for Watford for £500 a week. And then in that same season, he ended up getting promoted to the Premier League. It's kind of stuff what dreams are made of. So the likes of him, Ashley Young, who a lot of people forget, was at Watford, started off at Watford. I know he's at Inter Milan now. I was at his very first game he ever scored. It was a pre-season friendly against Real Zaragoza, and he scored an absolute screamer from about 25, 30 yards officially. I was convinced it was about 60. But he scored an absolute screamer. And it's weird because I remember kind of watching it and going, God, this guy's going to be a really good player someday. And obviously he ended up in the likes of Villa, Manchester United and Inter Milan. But obviously I can't forget kind of, you know, our captain and the legend, and no doubt a statue is going to be built once he retires, kind of Troy Deeney. I know it's a cliche as such to talk about Troy Deeney, but in the modern era that we have now, it's not very often players stay at clubs for 10 seasons or more. You know, we could have easily kind of let him go when he had a bit of trouble at the beginning of his career with Watford, off the field problems, but we didn't. We stuck through him. We stuck by him, and obviously now he's kind of turns into the kind of the legend that he is at the club, and obviously captain now as well. So it's kind of, from a modern era point of view, you know, you have to give Troy Deeney the respect and due that he is, because just for staying with the club, he did have offers to leave, but he decided to stay with the club. So I think a lot of probably fans maybe forget that you know, Troy's been with us for such a long period of time. It's, you know, I think he gets the respect, I think, from the fans, but I think kind of it's probably when he retires and when he leaves the club, that's when we realise how special of a person and a player he was at the club itself.
Absolutely. So, us football fans, we're notorious for being a little bit fickle. Are there any players that you particularly didn't enjoy watching?
Oh God, how long do we have, James? Because I can mention quite a few. The difficulty is when you're obviously being the fan that you when you were a Watford fan, we tend to obviously the Pozzos are renowned for kind of getting players from literally nowhere, brilliant scouting network, getting them into the club, and then kind of we sell them on that for a profit. That's the model of the club. That's the model in Udinese. So as a Watford fan, sometimes you accept that. But then that leads to, obviously, they take quite big gambles on players. And one player I used to get incredibly frustrated with, because he had so much ability, was a player called Fernando Forestieri. Yeah. He ended up at Sheffield Wednesday, and he's now actually at Udinese as we speak. So he's done the full kind of back to the Pozzos. But this player had unbelievable technique, unbelievable drive, and just what I would say, he had the kind of the raw ability that you might see in the likes of, say, Dele Alli, in the likes of kind of other kind of players, that you know he has so much ability, just sometimes just lacks the composure. I suppose, and the other kind of other player that stands out for me, and which might be a surprise to a lot of people listening, is Ismail Sarr. So Ismail Sarr, we signed for, he's the club record signing. He's 40 million pounds. Now he's been linked with Liverpool, Manchester, even in the latest transfer window, he's been linked with the teams leaving us. When you watch him, I just want to shout, because I just would love to hire David Beckham just for half the day, and just to show him how to cross the ball, because Ismail Sarr has the pace to beat any defender in the Championship, and even early in the Premier League. But his end product always lets him down. If you watch him, I love to see the statistics on his kind of successful crossing, because I think he's too quick for himself. He gets to a point and he's so quick that he doesn't then know how to tell his legs how to cross the ball in a really good format. So that's why it sounds really silly. I love to get the likes of, say, David Beckham, just to spend half an afternoon with him, just to show him some techniques how to cross the ball. Now, I know that might be quite harsh, but for a player who's the club record signing, he's £40 million. Now, he's still young. He's still 20. He's only just turned 23. I think, there's so much potential there that player can turn into, I think, in my opinion, a really, really good Premier League player. But it's just, he's so frustrating to watch in terms of his crossing ability. I just think his legs are too quick for his brain. His brain just doesn't know how to react to how quick he is. Who knows, with time, he might slow down like the rest of us all do, and his crossing might get better.
So we've discussed what it's like to be a fan. Now it's time to test your knowledge. You're going to have 5 questions about Watford and 5 questions about football in the 92 in general. Now, how do you think you're going to do?
I'll be 100% honest with James. If this quiz was name Irish players in the 92 clubs, I think I'll be your man. But I think anything else, I might struggle a little bit. I'm not going to lie. I'm very narrow-minded. I'm very focused on my team and who we're playing. So, I may struggle.
I'll be honest, this set of 10 questions is a little bit easier because in previous episodes I think people have struggled. So I've kind of made them a little bit easier this time round. So we'll see how you do. Question 1. In what year were Watford promoted from what was Division 1 to the Premier League for the first time?
98, 99.
I'll give you that. It was 99, yes.
Yeah, 99.
Question 2. Mo Salah's first Premier League appearance was for which club?
Chelsea.
Question 3. What is Will Hughes' shirt number?
Oh, James, you're breaking my heart. Is it 19?
It is 19. Well done.
Oh, get in.
Which teams were promoted last season from the Championship?
Fulham. West Brom.
The really obvious one, this one.
Oh, see, it's worse when you say it's really obvious, James.
They won the league.
Oh,
You're going to kick yourself out here.
Leeds.
It was
of course,
Leeds.
Everyone was talking about them. Oh, God, how did I forget? Because you know what it is? I've tried to block out Leeds ever since that incident in 2005. I blocked Leeds out. So.
Question 5. Name the 4 stands at Vicarage Road.
Okay, so you have the Rookery end. You have the Elton John stand. The Graham Taylor stand. I was going to say it's the away stand, but that's what it's called. That's where the away fans sit. It might be called Vicarage Road end.
It is. Well done.
Oh, yes. Get in.
Question 6. Joey Barton recently left his managerial role at Fleetwood and this past week has been appointed manager at which other club?
Bristol Rovers.
It was. Graham Taylor was manager and chairman at Watford, but which team did he manage first?
I don't think it is, but Aston Villa?
No, it was Lincoln City.
Lincoln, yeah. He went on to study...
Question 8. What team play at Fratton Park?
Portsmouth.
Yep. Question 9. Troy Deeney signed for Watford in 2010, but what club did he join from?
Walsall.
It was. And your final question. Which Premier League team had a goal ruled out, then allowed, and then disallowed again on Saturday?
Was it Brighton?
It was Brighton, yes.
Yes, get in.
So, out of a possible 10, I think you actually got 10.
Well, James,
I'm not
going to
lie.
lie.
You got 9.
Breaking my heart there. I think I surprised not only yourself but me as well. I think I've surprised myself.
Well done. So moving on to the current season, and it's going quite well this season, isn't it? You're in third after the loss against Bournemouth on Saturday. How would you sum up the season so far?
Yeah, I think it's been a good season for us so far. I know it's probably quite controversial to maybe somewhat to some of the fans are thinking, but I think if fans expected us to kind of go straight back up, I think they've forgotten how tough the Championship actually is. I find the Championship is one of the only leagues where still I think any team can beat each other.
Yeah.
It's so competitive, so hard to predict. Now, if you asked, I would say most fans at the beginning of the season, you're lying in third with a number of games to go, would you be happy with this? I think the vast majority would say yes. It's the big kind of thing for us really was what players would we lose during the kind of the transfer windows, because obviously the type of players that we had were too good for us.
Yeah.
Just didn't perform the previous season, but were too good for us. No, we lost obviously quite a number of players. But for me, in my opinion, we kept on to for me, the key players, the likes of kind of Will Hughes, is kind of a massive player that we needed to keep on. I think we have strengthened correctly in terms of defence. I think defence now we're very solid. I think our midfield pairing, I think is quite good. I think what probably has let us down this season is kind of our investment in strikers. Now, obviously, Troy Deeney's kind of been ruled out for quite a lot of the season through injury. Now, he has scored when he plays, but it's all tends to be penalties for us. Yeah. Juan Pedro has been brilliant, I think, for us. I think he's another player who I think could be quite outstanding if he kind of leads us. But the likes of kind of say Andre Gray he's just lacking confidence this particular his time at Watford. I just don't think he's had a good time at Watford. I think he's lacking in confidence. I think obviously he's getting quite a lot of stick from the fans as well. So from my opinion, I think we're in a good position. I don't think we will get automatically promoted. I think we'll get playoffs, which is obviously it's a lottery on if we can get through the playoffs or not. But at the beginning of the season, I went to a couple of friends and I made kind of an own kind of side bet with them that it'll be the playoffs that we would get this season instead of automatic promotion. But there's still a lot of time to play, so who knows in this Championship League what will happen.
So you kind of mentioned it a little bit there. In terms of transfers, how much has the team changed from the one that got relegated from the top flight?
Yeah, so what I would kind of say to that is we have lost quite a lot of our creative players, the likes of Jacoury, Delafeu, Pereira. Kind of quite a lot of our midfield creativity has left the club. So it's probably been one area I think we have struggled with a little bit this season. It is kind of being quite creative. We did lose kind of Matt Dawson to West Ham, who, in my opinion, I think played all right for us. But with all due respect to Matt Dawson, when you hear you sign Matt Dawson, and ask any fan this, do you really get excited in your stomach, in the bottom of your stomach? I didn't. He wasn't what I would say a sexy signing, so we did lose him. So I think this kind of season we have lost quite a lot of our creativeness in midfield. But with the new kind of formation the manager's playing, which tends to be kind of 4-3-3 at the moment, your Ismail Sarr and Ken Sema on each wings are exciting to watch and are kind of quite attack-minded players to watch. It's just I suppose it's quite difficult from losing your kind of creativity. The owners have come out and said that they would invest when they feel that is needed, and I think quite a lot of fans have been quite annoyed this season that we haven't heavily invested with players this season. But one player which I think I am looking forward to seeing a little bit more is a player we've bought from the Norwegian league called Zinkerman. We've managed to get him on a free. He scored 20 plus goals from midfield in the Norwegian league last season. He was the player of the season. To get a player like that for free, I think is really good kind of business from the club. But I believe in the owners, and I believe kind of in the kind of their philosophy behind in signing players. I suppose all you have to look at the likes of, say, Richarlison, who we signed for it was about £10 million or so that we signed, and paid phenomenal for us for a season, and we sold him to Everton for 50 million. Juan Pedro, who's been scoring as of late for us, cost 2 million. I think kind of as Watford fans, we probably are too used to kind of how like spending 40 million on a player, we're quite probably too used to those kind of signings. We need to remember what it was like previously and to remember what it's like in the Championship. We need we need solid players in the Championship to kind of just help us get promoted, and then once we're promoted again, we can focus on these luxury signings that all the fans kind of love to read about.
Absolutely. So what are your thoughts on the current manager, Chisco?
Well, as of today's recording, he is still manager. So I'm hoping by the time this obviously podcast is released, he still will be the manager. As a Watford fan, we change managers like, sometimes people change their underwear. We change it so often. So with this current manager, I like him. He's very attack-minded. He, speaks quite good English, which I know sounds quite basic, but I think it's important for him to be able to speak quite good English so he can communicate quite well to the players. He comes across as a good manager. So I think his very first game was manager for us was against Norwich, who were top of the league at the time. And we beat them. We beat them over Christmas, and he just kind of got good vibes into the team, and and he even played like Sweet Caroline, I think, randomly in the changing rooms just to kind of get a feel good factor. Because look, it's very cliche, but when your players are happier and happy with kind of the environment, they play better for you. And I think under the previous manager, or Vladimir Ivic, the players weren't happy, and then they just stopped playing for him. So under this kind of current manager, I'm happy with him, and I'm happy he's attack minded, because I rather us lose 3-2 than maybe scrape a 0-0 or 1-0. He's quite attack minded, and I think the best thing we can do for him now is give him to the end of the season and then review it again, in my opinion.
So if Watford do get promoted back to the Premier League, do you reckon he would be the right man to take the club forward?
I think it's only fair to give the guy an opportunity. If he gets us promoted, then I think it's only fair to to give him a crack at the Premier League. No, it's not like it's something that we haven't done before in terms of, give a manager a period of time. If we're not happy, we switch straight away. That's the Watford model.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't agree with it, but that's our model, and that's what has previously worked for us. So in my opinion, I think it's, if he can get us promoted, they can give him an opportunity to show what he can do in the Premier League with a bigger budget. I think he'd be probably more suited, personally, to the Premier League than the Championship. So
let's cast our minds to earlier on in the season then, and to cup competitions. Obviously, you're out of both the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup now, but how important are cup competitions to you? You went out in the third round of both of those competitions. Was that ever a priority, or was getting back to the Premier League more important?
Premier League. James, Premier League is number one.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, everyone loves the experience of kind of a day out at the cup and everything else, and don't get me wrong, it's memories I will always have going to the FA Cup final. But from the club's point of view, and I think from probably quite a lot of the fans' point of view, is let's focus on where we want to be, which is the Premier League, and let's get rid of any kind of sort of distractions. I think obviously the cup competitions is a great opportunity for us to play kind of some squad players, or to get some young players back in the team, because that's something I've probably been frustrated with as a fan over the last number of years. Is we used to have a phenomenal academy, and we now focus more on kind of signing players in and trying to maybe sell them on for a higher profit. So the cup competitions is ideal for that, but at the same time, if you ask any Watford fan would you rather get to an FA Cup final, or would you rather and potentially lose, or would you rather get promoted, I'm pretty sure most would say get promoted. And for me, that's kind of my priority this season, is just us to get back into the Premier League.
Absolutely. So if Watford do go back to the Premier League, what areas do you think will need strengthening? I think you've alluded to it a little bit there.
Yeah, I think it's quite key in the Premier League that every if you look at every club bar maybe your top two or three are looking for strikers. So I would love the likes of Ivan Toney. We were linked to him during the summertime. I would love the likes of him at our club if we got promoted, just to see if he could, embed and could have a good run in the Premier League. If you look at the likes of Aston Villa and Ollie Watson, who's obviously came from Brentford, is doing very well for them. So I would kind of say we do need to strengthen our striker area, but from a kind of a midfield point of view, we just need someone who's a bit more kind of creative going forward. We had obviously Doucouré, who went to Everton, who was that type of player, who was kind of like your Patrick Vieira as such player. That's a kind of an area we would need to strengthen. And I feel if we were lucky enough to get promoted.
This is the part of the podcast where we get you to pitch your team. So picture the scene, you're meeting somebody for the first time and you've got to convince them that Watford is the football team that they need to support. What would you say to them?
I would say, do you want us to go to support the team where people will always question why often do you change your managers? Do you want to feel safe and kind of go to a club where all creeds are welcome, but we're never going to be unbelievable, but we're never going to be really, really bad. We're just your very kind of your average, your above average, I would say, team. But what I would kind of add to that then is that, do you want the kind of the excitement of, finding out who we've signed and who's this random player from, Brazil that we have signed that no one knows anything about? Then I think Watford is probably the team for you. So yeah, I think as a Watford fan, I think it's always exciting January and kind of the summer transfer windows, because you sign players and you're going, I have no idea. Even the manager, any manager we've recently appointed, obviously the most current recent one came from the Georgian Football League, where he won the league. I didn't even know there was a football league in Georgia until we signed this manager. So it's really good to broaden your horizons being a Watford fan, because you learn quite a lot about world football as a fan of us.
So if you could create your ideal Watford 11 all time, what would it be?
Yes, so this is quite a tough one, James, because as I mentioned before, kind of the amount of players that we have signed in particular from Udinese and Granada. I think even so much so that Ian Holloway, who was manager of Crystal Palace at the time when they got promoted, even made a sly comment. And he's now on my list of people I don't like, which is really hard because Ian Holloway is a likeable guy, but, he annoyed me with that comment. So going through my team, I would play probably a 4-3-3. Which is the kind of the way we're currently playing at the moment. In goals, it's been quite tough because I mentioned previously about Almunia with the penalty save, and obviously the octopus Heredia Gomez, who's just a lovable person and just a really nice person. But I think I have to go with Ben Foster, simply because this is his second time at the club. He was at the club with us originally on loan from Manchester United. And he was with us when we got promoted that season to the Premier League in 2005. So it has to be Ben Foster, plus his YouTube channel, which I think is really, really good and really something different to watch. So Ben Foster's in goal for me. On my back four, the right back has been quite difficult because you have Kiko Femina, who for me is technically the best right back in the Championship, I feel. He was previously at Barcelona and Real Madrid, so he's very, very attack-minded, and I think he's an enthusiastic player to watch. But from a club status and a club legendary point of view, it has to be Lloyd Doyle. This is going back quite a while. Lloyd Doyle played in hundreds and hundreds of games for us, but only ever scored one goal for Watford. So much so that there was special t-shirts made when he scored for Watford. It was a header against QPR. And I remembered when he scored, he didn't know what to do. And to this day, if you ask, if you ever see interviews with any of the players who were currently playing at the time, they always go on about how Lloyd Doyle was just a lovely person, but a good character to have around the changing rooms. Kind of going into the centre halves, Jay Demerit, just simply because of his story and his journey to becoming a Watford player and a Watford kind of legend, kind of alongside of him then. Interestingly, I would have a player called Sebastian Prodo. We signed him in the very first season we went into the Premier League. He, what I would be described as kind of 6 foot plus of just pure stone, just nothing got past them, hard as nails, brilliant in the air. Just left us last season to go back to, I think, Udinese. But Sebastian Prodo was a kind of a under the radar signing, but for me it was just solid and was a brilliant player. And then to finish my defenders, I would have Paul Robinson, club legend, now doing quite a lot of work for the media team at the club, with their match day reporting. But Paul Robinson was a solid kind of left back for us, and when I was kind of growing up at the club. Looking onto your midfield, this one was a bit difficult, but I'm going very attack-minded. So on one side, I have Ashley Young, who I had on the back of my jersey when I was growing up. There was when I was talking about earlier about the curse I had of attending games, there was also the curse of any player that I would have on the back of my jersey would leave that season. Danny Webber, Heide Helgeson, Ashley Young, Marlon King, Clark Carlisle, John Joe O'Toole. The list is endless of players I would get on the back of my jersey at the beginning of the season, and then later that season they would leave. So after Ashley Young, I stopped getting the name printed on the back of my jersey because I really loved Ashley Young. I thought he was an enthusiastic, kind of traditional winger to play for us. I then have Adelaide Corey, because just the pure kind of raw talent, the kind of the Patrick Vieira style of running, and that man has the motor of someone I've never seen before. He can just go on and on all day for us, and I think he's now showing it for Everton at the moment. I think he's playing really, really well for Everton, and I think he's someone that we could have initially sold him to for 40 million. We kept on to him for another season. But yeah, he's another player I think is phenomenal. And then to finish off the midfield is Will Hughes. Vastly, I don't think he's underrated by Watford fans. I think every Watford fan is a big fan of him. I think he's just maybe slightly underrated by other clubs. Just the way he tempos the game and the way he intercepts the play. He's just well, put it this way, it's clearly quite obvious the reason why we went on out of our last 5 games, we won 4, was because Will Hughes is back in the team, was back from injury. So I think he's one player I think is really, really kind of good and fits into my team quite well. Strikers wise, so this was quite easy in terms of 2 out of the 3. So Troy Deeney, I have to put it in, club legend, in the top 3 now of the all-time goal scorers for the club. Ariane Gallo, who was obviously was phenomenal for us when he was in the Premier League. Him and Troy Deeney went on this unbelievable kind of partnership. Reminded me of kind of Andy Cole and Dwight York kind of partnership. Now Gallo obviously ended up in China, back at Manchester United for a little bit, which this would sound really silly. I was actually really happy for him because he's a big Manchester United fan. He's now, I think, in Saudi Arabia at the moment. But Gallo, for me, it was just a pure goal scorer, great striker. The final striker and the final player in the team is a really difficult one because I was torn between kind of the likes of Heider Helgeson, Danny Graham. Danny Graham was phenomenal for us for the 2-3 seasons he played for us. It was his best goal scoring form of his whole career with us. I mentioned obviously kind of Richarlison as well, who was phenomenal. But it has to go to Vidra, who's now at Burnley. The season we got promoted to Premier League, under the first season under the Pozzos, he got 20 plus goals by February. He was nominated and won Player of the Year for that season. And he and kind of Troy Deeney together were just phenomenal pairing. Now, when he got to the Premier League, I don't think he was a bit harsh, maybe good enough to play in the Premier League. And I think, he's been at Derby and, he's been at Burnley since. I think he falls onto the problem of Robert Hornshaw, too good for the Championship, but not good enough for the Premier League. Your Darren Huckabee potentially. It's a couple of Conor Hourihane, another player's name. A little bit just too good for the Championship, but just not good enough for the Premier League. So Vidra falls into my last player in my dream team.
Well, thank you very much, Ivan, and good luck to Watford for the rest of the season.
Cheers, James. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks again to Ivan for talking to us, and of course, thank you for listening. If you'd like to help me on my quest to speak to at least one fan from each of the clubs in the 92 and talk all about your club, you can find us on Twitter at the 92 Podcast or email us the92podcast@gmail.com. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the podcast so that you don't miss an episode. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, let us know what you think of the podcast by leaving us a rating and a review. Next time, I'll be talking to another fan from another club in the 92. See you then.